You're listening to Olivia's Book Club, an Arizona's Family Originals podcast.
Hello there, readers, and welcome to Olivia's Book Club. I'm your host, Olivia Fierro, and there are so many good books to read this summer. Time is really an issue, and sleep is just an annoying expectation that we don't have time for anymore. But now I'm so excited to get to my guest, the author of a thriller. I was trying to come up with something creative, so I went with Twistier Than a Funnel Cake at the County Fair. How's that for a visual? David Ellis is an award-winning crime fiction author, and as if that's not impressive enough, an Illinois appellate court judge. So yeah, folks, that means he's a lawyer first and all of that. And how do people do all of this? It's incredible. The new book is Stay Close. It is just got to be to the top of your TBR list, no doubt about it. So David, thank you so much for joining me, and congratulations on a wildly entertaining, surprising, twisty page-turner of a book.
Well, thanks. It was, Olivia, it was so much fun to write. I wrote this book. I hadn't written one of my own books for a while because I've been writing with James Patterson. And I thought, okay, it's time to go back. And it was during the pandemic. And I thought, what am I in the mood for? Because if the writer is not entertained, then the reader's not going to be. And I thought, I've really been enjoying all these whodunits and all these twisty things where people are not what they seem, and almost in a serial way. Like if you watch a streaming show from episode 1 to 7, everything has changed. And I thought I want to condense that into a book. And so I decided I'm going to keep the reader guessing through the whole book and hopefully fool them. And at the end of the day, you'll say, wow, that was a lot of fun. And I had no idea that was the end.
I had no idea what was going on at any point, but I was all in and I was giving it my best to figure out what was happening. Okay, introduce us to Simon and Vicky and the lady named Lauren.
Sure. So Simon is one of the two protagonists. I really think Simon and Vicky are both protagonists. Simon is a law professor who is married to Vicky. They are in a marriage that I think it's clear they care about each other, but it's probably fair to say they're not madly in love with each other. At least it doesn't go in both directions. There are some affairs going on in the book, and Lauren is his love from the past, who reappears in this little suburban area where they live. And I'm giving nothing away by telling you that Lauren will die, because you'll know that very early on in the book, very early on. And Vicky is somebody who, she's one of my favorite characters of all time. She, that I've written at least, she is somebody who came from a pretty hard scrabble life. She was a runaway. She did the kind of things that a lot of people unfortunately have to do when they're runaways to survive. She sold her body. She, was poor, and she has now met Simon, and they're not exactly a match made in heaven. They care about each other a lot, but there's a lot going on, and there's also a trust fund. Simon inherited a lot of money from his father, and the trust fund says that when you've been married for 10 years, that would be Vicky, then the wife will have access to the money. And of course, as the book begins, we're getting awfully close to that 10-year.
Obviously, of course, over the years, I used to lament that I'm not coming into any trust fund money, or there's no money. There's no money coming my way. But you know what? You're a lot generally safer, and you can trust people in your inner circle, and certainly your romantic partners a lot more when you come with no money. Money complicates things. Money complicates things, as you well know. In particular, the very specific, very stringent details of this agreement here regarding this trust. Is that something in your legal expertise is out there? Do people make stipulations to this extent?
The truth is you can put whatever you want in a trust. If you're going to devolve money to, usually it's a child, but it doesn't have to be, you can put any restriction on you want. You can say you can only spend it for this amount, for these reasons. You can only spend it when you reach a certain age. it is a binding document. What I envisioned here was, well, a fairly spiteful father who felt like maybe his own romantic relationships didn't go so well, would put that on his son. It's a pretty awful thing to have done to his son, but yeah, it is absolutely something you could do. I don't see a lot of trust, but sometimes there are legal fights over a trust, and you'd be amazed at some of the things that people put in these.
Oh, I cannot imagine the extent of how nasty things could get, I'm sure is limitless. But what you did as a writer by crafting just that kind of told us everything we needed to know about the father and about the strained relationship and all of the strings and the distrust and the nastiness that would be kind of coming into Simon's background. So Simon is a very interesting character, highly intelligent, a little bit smug, and I would say relatively charming, even though he describes himself as a little bit socially awkward.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think of themselves as socially awkward, even if they don't come across that way. I like characters who recognize the not so great parts of themselves, because we all do that in our own lives. And you meet people who are very sunny and positive, and you think these people are always happy, but they're not always happy. They're just very good at portraying themselves a certain way. And so I like to dig into that a little bit. And there's a risk, because some people don't want to read that in a book. They just want to read kind of the superficial plot stuff. And I understand that, and I appreciate that. Sometimes that's all I want to do too, but I like to dig in a little bit. And Simon, Simon is a guy who he has what we call Irish Alzheimer's, which means he only remembers the grudges. So Simon remembers all of the grudges in his life, and he got that from the author of the novel, me. I'm also a pretty happy guy, but I do remember if you disrespected me. I do remember this. And so Simon obviously carries some baggage, and he should probably be mature enough to let it go, but he doesn't necessarily. And fortunately for us, he doesn't let it go, because it leads to some pretty interesting things in the book.
Wow. I mean, I'm not Irish, but I would say the same. It's they'll forgive but never forget, I guess, is part of it. But he is the environment and just kind of everything that we get to learn about him is exactly what I love about this book. And I generally, so I wanted to say, for anybody who's listening who maybe has not read you before, and this was my first time reading you, I don't ever kind of gravitate towards like a court trial novel.
Right.
I'll see the movies or a television show, but what this gives is this depth of characters, and yes, we're talking about some legal concepts because he's a law professor, but it is absolutely not courtroom drama. So is this different from what you usually do, or is this kind of along the same vein of the books that you have been writing over the past few years?
No, that's a great question. The truth is, this is a departure for me. I've always loved psychological thrillers. I've always been drawn to them. The first book I ever wrote was called Line of Vision, and there was some courtroom drama in there, but really at its core, it was a psychological thriller. But I did have this legal background, and my publisher was, at the time, we're going back now about, much more, close to 20 years ago. They said, you write courtroom stuff well, you're a lawyer, kind of an accomplished lawyer, so why don't you stick to that stuff? And looking back, I probably wish I had focused more on this stuff, because this is my first love. I feel like I was reborn writing this, because this is not a courtroom drama. There's no court action at all. It's about crime and the law a little bit. It's really, at its core, a psychological drama pitting four people against each other in various ways that you learn more about as you go along. And I'm hooked. I mean, I love this stuff. I've never had so much fun writing a book. Look Closer is something that I've been thinking about for years. And my wife said, get back to writing your own books. The stuff you do with James Patterson is fantastic. I love it. I love the guy. It's so much fun. But she said, you've got your own stuff in your head that you want to get out. Look Closer has been in my head for a decade. And I've been thinking about Simon. I've been thinking about Vicky. And, they've been changing over time. They changed while I was writing it. That's the organic process of writing. But I'm in love with this. I have found my niche. This domestic thriller, psychological suspense, it's where I want to be.
Yes. And for me, the darker and more layered and hard to understand and suspicious the characters' minds, the more demented, the better is my pleasure zone. So it was absolutely fantastic. And I apologize if I might have said stay close as I was looking at Look Closer, and I'm thinking of a show that I was just watching also.
Hey, listen, if you want to confuse me with Harlan Coben, that's okay, all right?
It's the Toni Collette show adaptation they just did for, I think it was for Netflix, right? So, okay.
I actually have that on my watch list, actually. Harlan Coben's a really nice guy. I've only met him a couple times, and he's super talented, and Toni Collette is one of my favorite actresses. So
she's so phenomenal in everything, in particular, really phenomenal in that. So, compliments, of course, lumping together. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about your background. I mean, I just marvel at, first of all, as a reader, I marvel at the talent of writers who are able to, bring us into a story, and you want to check out from your family and all your responsibilities and just stay in this book. But you're very successful legal background, and still, I mean, in this very impressive, I mean, Your Honor, excuse me, should I be saying that? Am I legally
you should
bound?
Not. You're totally fine.
I mean, how do you manage to succeed in both of these spheres? I mean, how many hours of the day are there for you?
Yeah. Well, I wish there were more than 24. I get up about 3 or 3:30 every morning, and I write until about 7. And then my kids, who are now range from ages 10 to 15, so they're getting a little easier, a little more independent. But, about 7 a.m., it's time for my wife, who's a lawyer, to get ready for work, and the kids to do whatever they're going to do. So really, 3:30 to 7 is my sweet spot. And I know that sounds brutal. It is brutal. And the older I get, the harder it gets. But, when you're waking up to do something, it's kind of like trying to wake your kids up to go to school versus trying to wake them up to get on an airplane and go to Disney World, right?
Yeah.
If they're going to Disney World, they get right up. Well, that's me every morning. I'm going to Disney World every morning when I get up. I mean, this is my vacation. This is my fun. So as long as I can physically awaken, which sometimes doesn't always happen right away, once I'm awake, my eyes pop open and I say, let's go write. Let's go write for the next 3 hours. And it's great fun.
That's amazing to me because I get up at that time as well because we do a morning show here.
Yeah.
But I get up and am completely brain dead. And there's just a zombie affect for the first, 30 to 45 minutes of life for me, where I can blink and say, like, what happened? I'm in a time warp. I'll look down and then, 20 minutes have passed, and that's why I'm chronically running late, because it's like it just goes away. And so to be able to, if I was relying on being productive or putting down anything meaningful in that little time zone, woof, it would be rough for an editor.
It can take a while. What would stress me out about your job is I would be terrified of oversleeping, because in my job, if I oversleep, the only person I've let down is myself. Maybe I've lost an hour of writing that morning, and I'll be mad when that happens, but it's just me. You can't oversleep. I would be so stressed to have to get up when you do. But literally, people are counting on me being somewhere.
Well, okay, so there's good and bad on all sides, I guess. We all have our little bits of pressure.
Right.
Take me back. I was just reading about you and your background, and I mean, you are many books worth of amazing life experiences in your own, still early on in all of these careers. But Chicago and everything that goes on in Chicago politics. I mean, you have had a front row seat for some pretty remarkable moments in time, namely the impeachment of Rod Lagovic.
Yes. At the time, I was the attorney for the Illinois House of Representatives. I was the chief counsel to the Speaker of the House, which meant I was the top lawyer in the House. And as we all know now, having seen a few presidential impeachments, an impeachment begins in the House. And so, I dealt with Rod Lagovic for a couple of years in Springfield, and there was a lot of tension between the governor and the legislature, and we didn't trust him. We wouldn't sit in the same room with him. We wouldn't hold meetings with him because we unless we had an outside witness to verify things, because we always thought he was doing stuff he shouldn't be doing. But then, of course, the bombshell hit in December of 2008. He was trying to sell the Barack Obama vacancy, to the highest bidder, and he was shaking down the Chicago Cubs and their owner, the Tribune, all these crazy things. And, the next thing I know, everyone turns to me and says, okay, Dave, how do we impeach a governor? And, okay, well, we'd never done it in the history of Illinois. We never impeached anybody except maybe one or two judges in the 1800s. So, all right, okay, start from scratch, take a look at the Bill Clinton impeachment proceedings and maybe borrow some ideas from that. But yeah, and so all of a sudden, and then of course, once we impeached him, I was the prosecutor in the Senate. So I literally tried him and prosecuted him in the Illinois Senate. And I'm sitting here thinking, what just happened? This all happened over a 6-week period. We've got cameras from around the world up in the balcony filming us. I'm getting phone calls from, Zimbabwe and Australia. Everybody wants to talk to me, and I didn't want to talk to anybody because I was just trying to get the job done right. So it was like, when those basically 6-8 weeks were done, I just said, what just happened?
Yeah.
It was crazy, but yeah, no, Chicago is a very fertile ground, as you can imagine, and I'm understating it. There's a lot of political corruption issues here. And there's a lot of fodder for a guy like me because I like to write about politics. I'm not doing it now. That's not Look Closer. That's nothing about politics. And of course, Olivia, politics have become a third rail. So you got to be careful what you say in a book. But yeah, boy, when people say, where do you get your ideas from? I say, I just open my eyes and walk through the city.
Well, it's you've got an incredible advantage and so many spaces to mine just for insight into the psychological uniqueness of people who make news, whether it's a character that's, just creating a ripple effect of change on a college campus or, whatever. But the things that make people tick that you've been able to observe and have to figure out how to strategize around or move through somehow alongside with or against in real life. I mean, the doors are open for you. Fact is stranger than fiction, so there's no limitations in your writing.
No, that's absolutely right. In fact, when Blagojevich got arrested by the FBI and the impeachment was about to begin, a year before that, I had slowed down my writing for my publisher. They wanted a book a year, and I was slowing down because Blagojevich was really abusing the legislature, and he was forcing us into session literally every single day, even weekends, and because he has the power to do that. And so I told my publisher, they said, why aren't you getting your books done, Dave? You're going slow. I said, we've got this crazy governor who nobody at that time had heard of if you didn't live in Illinois. And they said, well, if he's so interesting and mercurial and strange, why don't you write a book about him? So I had started to write a book about him, Olivia. I had about 300 pages done about a guy who, comes to the governorship with good intentions and kind of gets drawn to the dark side and people around him. And then he went and got arrested. And I said, well, now fact is way stranger than my fiction. I had to throw the whole book in the garbage and start over. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, it is amazing the things that actually happen. And I'd say it almost weekly, something will happen. I'd say, I would have never felt confident enough to put that in a book.
Right.
And yet it really happened. Nobody would believe it if I put it in a book, but then it goes out and happens. And
Right.
Nowadays, it seems like we're getting a lot of that, right?
No doubt about it.
Yeah.
Tell me, as you're approaching breaking down your story like this, I mean, okay, so you said you're rising early, you're writing. Nothing, I think what I love about thrillers is the complexity and the, admiration I have for a writer who's able to get us all the way from here to here with all of these twists that we've talked about and still keeping us on track to get somewhere. I mean, how in the world do you do that?
Well, one of the things that you have as the advantage as the author, because I always think of mysteries like this as games. It's a game between me and the reader, and it's a game we're willingly playing together. But the unfair fight in the game is that I can write out of order. I can go back later and add a little red herring that will be enough of a tip so you can say it was there. I could have caught it. Because that's what you want, right? You want a fair surprise. You want one that you could have caught, but you didn't. That's the best kind of surprise, when it was right there, but you missed it because I somehow was able to, hide it. And so I can write out of order. I can have an idea of where I want it to end and where I want it to begin, and I can change things and change my mind and go back and change whatever I want to. And then you read it in a sequential order. You read it how I let you read it, right? So it's a little bit of a tilted battle in favor of the author if the author can do it well. And it takes a long time to do it well. And I did a lot of rewrites on this thing because I really wanted you to be able to say, all right, I had all the information there. It just didn't all add up together. So to me, that's the most fun about the writing is picturing. I put myself in the reader's shoes and I say, what's a reader going to think of this? What are they going to be thinking right now? This person is good or bad, or this person's motive is this or that. And I know what I want them to think. And so I'll push them in that direction and hope they go there.
Oh, so good. So
it's so fun.
The pressure is on then. You follow up this and they're like, come on, now we want your next book, and we want it to be a lot like this probably, right?
Yeah, and I am finishing it right now. I've been sleepless nights trying to get my next book done. I was doing it a half hour before we started today. I just finished it. I literally finished. I got to the last word. That's what I mean by finished. I got to the last word of the book about half an hour ago. And now, of course, I got to go through it and, but yeah, no, I mean, that's the thing. It's once you put something together that people like, they say, okay, when's the next one coming? The pressure, the starting gun goes off again.
Yeah, hurry up. What's taking you so long?
Yeah, it's a good problem to have. I'm not going to complain. I know a lot of people would like to be publishing books. It's a really tough business right now, so I'm grateful. But yeah, it's a lot of work.
Did you feel satisfied when you wrote that last word down, even though you're going to go back and edit?
I did. You sometimes don't know when you're going to end, and you also don't know when you're ready to let go of it. That's the single hardest thing, is saying, okay, this thing is ready to be shown to somebody. Because I could go back to any book, Look Closer, or any other book that I've written, and you turn me to a page and I could edit that page. I would say, oh yeah, I could fix this. I can make this a little better. You could do that till you're, till you meet your maker. And at some point you have to be able to say, all right, I'm ready to show this. It's hard. It's a very tough thing to know when to. I was just talking to my editor about that today. I said, look, it's done, but can I have a couple days? And she knows me. She's like, go ahead until but she knows she has to put a final hard deadline on me, or I'll just keep editing it.
Mm-hmm. To infinity.
Yeah, no, I mean, really, you could continue to edit these things forever. And, it's a cliche to say you're your own worst critic. I don't know if that's true, but I'm definitely very critical of myself.
Well, the results show in excellence. The book is just fantastic. As we wrap up, would you have any bit of advice for somebody who aspires to write, whether it's, in this genre or not?
Mm-hmm.
Having that confidence to put down whatever they've been, thinking about creatively, or maybe, you're working in a more of a practical industry and you want to indulge that creative side, but you don't feel quite brave enough to do it.
Well, you use the word confidence, and that's a good word. I might even go a step further and call it fearlessness. I would say be fearless and write what you want to write. And don't worry about anybody else reading it when you're writing your first draft, because if you don't want them to, it's up to you whether they read it or not. But don't let a lack of confidence or any kind of fear or anxiety stop you from just getting as much out as you can. It will be better than you think. One exercise I used to do was I would use a pen or a pencil. I would not use my computer, and I would just start writing. And I would say, don't worry about punctuation. Don't pause to find the right word. Just let it come out. And when I do that, when I'd write a scene that way, I would usually never change a word, which is crazy because you think, oh, it's going to be raw and awful. And what it is raw and awesome, because it's just coming straight out of me. I'm not worrying about, oh, how do I say it just right? I just pour it out. So there's a fearlessness that has to come. There's really two things you have to do to be a great writer. You have to write and you have to read good writing. And when you read good writing, think to yourself, what's great about this? What did he do or she do that made this so special? And it will sink in as you do it. But writing is a muscle. I taught myself how to write. My first book, I didn't know what the heck I was doing, but I just kept doing it. And I could say, no, it's not good enough yet, but I'm getting there. And I was building muscle. And by the end, I was, okay, I actually kind of know how to do this now. I just kind of taught myself how to do it. So write and read good stuff. Reading other people's stuff is so important.
That is great.
In fact, you should read Look Closer. There you go. There's my advice.
I saw the show. I'm doing it backwards.
Right.
That is great advice, though, because I just think that the screen and that blinking cursor there, is just sort of could be conceived as like a middle finger of, intimidation to somebody who is trying to start out in storytelling. So I love that freehand concept.
Yeah, no, it worked great. And really, the biggest obstacle is between your ears. It's your anxiety, your insecurity, or I'm going to write something and no one's going to like it. I promised myself when I wrote my first book that I was going to see it through, because there's a million reasons not to write a book. I mean, I was a busy lawyer. I worked 12, 14-hour days. And who wants to take an hour a night to write something that no one's going to read? But I said, no, I'm going to see it all the way through. And then if it gets rejected, I can say I tried and I won't have any regrets. And I just kept going and it was a labor of love. But the thing I'm proudest of is that I saw it through, because it's a pyramid. And at the bottom of that pyramid, the widest part is everyone who thinks it'd be kind of cool to write a book. And that's most people, right? Most people will say that. It'd been fun to write a book. And you go up, and as it gets narrower, it's the people who are willing to see it all the way through. So it took me 3 years to write my first draft of my first book. And I just didn't stop. I just said, I'm going to give this a try. And, it worked out for me.
And all along knowing, oh, yeah, I got this other little career I could always fall back on, which is isn't going too poorly either. David Ellis, thank you so much. What an absolute pleasure to speak with you. The book is Look Closer, and it is so good. So it is a must add to your reading list. And my husband was actually trying to rip it out of my hands as I was finishing it. I'm like, I need to finish this. I need to bring it to work. And then you may take it with us as we go away this weekend. So thank you.
Well, good. Well, you're very nice to have me on. This was a great, and I'm feeling very fortunate and very blessed. So thanks so much for having me.
Yes, it deserves all of the attention. So congratulations on Look Closer and on draft number 1 of the next one we'll be watching. Yes. David, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Olivia's Book Club, the podcast. I'm your host, Olivia Fierro. Our producer is Margaret Stewart. Our editor is Nick Sanchez. You can send us an email with your thoughts or your book recommendations. Olivia's Book Club at azfamily.com is the address. And you can check out Olivia's Book Club on Facebook or find us on Instagram. Hello, Bookstagrammers, at olivias.bookclub. And Margaret is at Overbooked and Overdue. Make sure to rate and subscribe to this podcast and tell your friends. You can find us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and Amazon Music.
This is Olivia's Book Club, an Arizona's Family Originals podcast.